Part 7. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 61. In the sky above Wuyutan City. A figure flew quickly towards the outside of the city. And the passers-by who were walking on the street also looked up one after another. In a relatively nice small courtyard of the Xiao family. Xiao Suner looked up at the disappearing figure, a hint of surprise flashed through her beautiful eyes. Ling Ying. Xiao Suner spoke calmly. Then a handsome young man in a black brocade robe appeared next to her like a ghost from a tree. The handsome young man known as Ling Ying knelt on one knee. It seemed that even though his cultivation was at the level of a fighting emperor, he still remained respectful in front of this young girl. Miss, Ling Ying frowned and spoke, as if she knew what the other party wanted to ask. That figure just now, is that him? Xiao Suner lightly opened her red lips. Although she had already guessed that Xian Chen's strength was definitely not simple, she did not expect that it would be so terrifying. Ling Ying nodded silently, acquiescing to this matter. Xiao Suner sighed softly, a trace of sadness flashed across her face. The Xiao family held a big banquet today, but I was not invited. I knew something would happen. Now that brother Xian Chen has revealed his true strength, it seems that he is breaking up with the Xiao family. Although Ling Ying had complicated emotions, she still remained silent. Looking at the handsome but wooden figure in front of her, a trace of contempt flashed in Xiao Suner's eyes. Now that the Xiao family has undergone major changes, it seems that our plan is to be accelerated, Xiao Suner said calmly, without the playful and cute look in front of her. Seeing the very serious Xiao Suner say such words, Ling Ying said with great relief, "The master will definitely be pleased for the young lady." "Well, you go ahead." Xiao Suner waved her hand. Now Xian Chen has left. If she hadn't been on a mission, she might have followed Xian Chen's footsteps and left. It's summer now, and the sun is scorching like fire. The scorching heat scorched the dirt floor until cracks were clearly visible. I don't know how long it took, when Xian Chen descended from the sky and came to a relatively clear river, sitting quietly. As time goes by, before the sky gradually darkened, Xian Chen finally arrived at a small town in the Warcraft Mountains. Although there are many Warcraft in the Warcraft Mountains. But for those in adventure groups, it is a good way to make a fortune. So some rich and powerful adventure groups. They will also choose places with dense crowds to build their own temporary base. Over time, as the number of people increases, even a deserted place will turn into a nice bustling street over time. Walking on this street, I was surrounded by some soldiers who had been licking blood from their swords all year round. His keen eyes had already noticed Xian Chen. This town is called Qingshan Town. Because it is close to the Warcraft Mountains, it is also called the Warcraft Town. Although it is close to the Warcraft Mountains, perhaps because of the favorable location, this town appears extremely prosperous. Xian Chen noticed that there was greed in the eyes of those soldiers who looked at him, and then he walked into a tavern calmly and silently. As soon as he stepped into the tavern, a clerk with a flattering smile came quickly from the side. Looking at the sly look on the clerk's face, it was obvious that this was definitely a shady store. "Are you staying at a top hotel?" Although the clerk looked wretched, his honest smile was enough to make people feel less hostile. "Let's stay in the hotel and take a look at the scenery here." Xian Chen has been depressed since he left the Xiao family. If it weren't for Xiao Yan's excessive provocation, perhaps he would still be the super genius who says 1 is 1 and 2 is 2 in Wuyutan City. The clerk led Xian Chen to open a nice room, and then ordered the chef to prepare delicious meals. Not long after, Xian Chen drank most of the century-old wine. Just when Xian Chen was drinking and thinking, suddenly there was an extremely excited voice downstairs. "Tisk, tisk, the little medical fairy's waist is so thin. It would be great if I could hold her for a while." Fart. Where's the waist? It's clearly a deadly scimitar. Although the little medical fairy is wearing a dress, it still doesn't hinder her figure. When everyone heard the words, Xian Chen, who was confused, slowly came to the window holding a glass of wine. Looking down, he noticed that there was a busy drugstore opposite. The girl who was called the Little Medical Fairy was also wearing a pale white dress. Although her appearance is not stunning, she can still be said to be a rare beauty. The face with a gentle smile exudes a fresh and ethereal temperament. This unique temperament immediately increased the woman's charm significantly. Xian Chen's eyes turned to the woman. In the end, it stopped on the willow waist bound by a green belt. Looking at the willow waist that was less than a full grasp, a trace of surprise flashed across Suankin's eyes. The Little Medical Fairy, who was originally supported by the crowd, suddenly noticed something. When she looked up at the window where Xian Chen was, her puzzled face was filled with complexity. "Why is he here?" the Little Medical Fairy muttered to herself. Then she quickened her pace, turned around, and walked into the pharmacy called Wanyazai. And some of the soldiers who liked the Little Medical Fairy also raised their heads and noticed Xian Chen. When he saw a young man with fair complexion but a melancholy expression, a trace of disdain flashed across his lips. What is the origin of this young man? He can actually make the Little Medical Fairy's smile disappear. I don't know, which one of these people who can come to Qingshan town will be a fuel-efficient lamp. Maybe he is a prince of a certain family who escaped from Wuyutan City. I think this kid dares to enter a dominatrix's tavern at such a young age. If he's not really capable, he's a complete idiot. Although Xian Chen and them were only separated by a window, they both belonged to the same street, so he could naturally hear clearly what they were talking about. But as for the dominatrix, Xian Chen had already noticed that it was a black shop when he entered the tavern, so there was no need to worry too much. Leaving the window, although the Little Medical Fairy was indeed in good shape, she couldn't arouse Xian Chen's interest at all. He returned to the table, put it away, and drank the remaining half of the good wine in one gulp. His head was dizzy, so he slowly moved towards the bed. I don't know how long it took, but when Xian Chen opened his eyes, it was already late at night. Although it is summer now, the warm wind at night is blowing on Suankin's face from the window. Xian Chen, who was completely drunk, walked to the window and was about to close it when he suddenly saw a girl in a white dress walking out of Wanyao Palace with a suspicious look. Xian Chen, who frowned slightly, paid attention to the scene the whole time. When the girl in the white dress closed the doors and windows and was about to leave towards the street, a sudden figure suddenly appeared in front of her. This is the third volume. The previous chapter talks about the grudges and grudges with Xiao Yan, that is, how to change from friends to enemies. This volume tells the story of Xian Chen leaving the Xiao family and starting to travel around the world. So I hope that friends who have always liked this book can give more recommendation votes. In addition, friends who like it also hope to support it with rewards. After all, the quality of this book is decided by you. Grizzly Bear is an office worker. I just finished coding a chapter and now I have to go to work. Thank you for your continued support and affirmation. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 62. Yu. The Little Medical Fairy looked at the young man in his eyes and was frightened to retreat slightly. But when he reacted, he stared with vigilance. Looking at Xian Chen's somewhat depressed face, the little Dr. Fairy Chiu Shui's eyes flashed with an imperceptible brightness. Why did you suddenly come to Qingshan town, which is full of crises, when you weren't just staying in the Xiao family courtyard? You know, this Qingshan town is surrounded by monsters on all sides. Be careful, if you don't pay attention, those monsters will eat you. Looking at the Little Medical Fairy's deliberately teasing face, Xian Chen then stretched out his hand to pinch the opponent's chin, with a dangerous arc appearing at the corner of his mouth, and said with a bad smile, I don't know whether it's a demon or a monster, but all I saw was a young girl under the dark moon. Haha, the Little Medical Fairy was amused by Suankin's words, so she suddenly raised her legs, which made Xian Chen frown and suddenly evade. I also hope that Mr. Xianchen is as brave as the rumors say. When I see him today, he is just an ordinary man. By the way, I just don't know whether your surname is Xiao or Xian. The little medical fairy continued to provoke, but Xianchen let out a deep breath. Then he turned his back and said with a melancholy expression, "You actually don't know that I am not as beautiful as you thought. Now the Xiao family has changed greatly, and I am no longer a disciple of the Xiao family. So, girl, please don't address me as young master of the Xiao family anymore." Xianchen thought of the scene not long ago and couldn't help but sigh. However, the little medical fairy was not too surprised. She looked back at the closed doors and windows, and then walked past Xianchen. "Although I don't know if you are as brave as the rumors say, but just because you can stand on both sides, I can guess that you are definitely not a good person." The little medical fairy had a beautiful smile on her face, which looked strangely beautiful under the moonlight. Looking at the little medical fairy's leaving figure, Xianchen remained unmoved. But the little medical fairy who was originally walking suddenly stopped. Under Xianchen's gaze, he saw that the other party suddenly tilted his head slightly, with a smile on his beautiful face. "By the way, are you interested in entering the Warcraft Mountains? If you are interested, you can join our adventure group. After all, you are a strong man with the strength of a fighting master." The little medical fairy deliberately emphasized the word strong very harshly. Only when Xianchen reacted to the other party's smile did he really realize it. The beauty of the other party is not because of her appearance, but because of her smile, which seems to be a good medicine that can cure all sorrows. He walked to the tavern and looked at the door that was locked from the inside. Without thinking, Xianchen immediately raised his leg and kicked the heavy door into pieces. "Who is it?" Almost instantly, the waiter who was resting in the side room was so shocked that he broke into a cold sweat. He hurriedly picked up the sword hanging on the wall and rushed towards the main entrance. "Where are the people?" the waiter said with a puzzled face, but when he felt a cool breeze whistling through his neck. Immediately afterwards, a shallow line of blood appeared on his neck. When the nursing staff who heard the sound came over and saw the body of the tavern boy on the ground that had not yet cooled down, they seemed to light up lights and began to inquire from door to door among the tavern residents. "Get out! If I hide the person who killed Xiao Er, I will be struck by thunder. Damn it! You're blind. Don't you know that my eldest brother is the leader of the Grizzly Bear Adventure Group?" Boom, boom, boom. Xianchen, who had not yet laid down, was standing at the window looking at the little medical fairy who was already drifting away. Suddenly, the door of the room where he lived was knocked from outside. "Who?" Xianchen's pretended to be dull voice made the nurse who was outside preparing to ask, startled into a cold sweat. "Ahem, that's what my guest is saying. The boy in my tavern is dead. I just want to ask your guest if he saw anyone suspicious." A strong man stood outside the door sweating profusely. But Xianchen in the room raised his eyes and glanced at the sword still dripping blood on the table. After a moment of silence, the guards outside the door thought there was something fishy. Suddenly, a word came from the room that made them angry enough to spurt blood. "The kid in your tavern has a sly look. Let's not say who killed him. Even if it was me, I want to kill him. If you suspect that I was the one who killed you, you can come in and take a look. But if I wasn't the one who killed you, then you have to bear the pressure from me." Boom. An extremely powerful pressure swept through the room. This. Those nursing homes have always been overbearing. But now they suddenly encountered such a ruthless person who was even more domineering than them, and they were so scared that they peed their pants. "Why do I feel like it's him? Your mother hummer. A person who can exude this kind of aura must be the kind of existence that can rival any adventure group leader. How can he be so arrogant with a child? It seems like we've hit a brick wall this time. Let's retreat first. Otherwise, the other party will really kill us all." Listening to the sound of fleeing footsteps outside, Xian Chen lay quietly on the bed. A night without words and full of weirdness passed like this. When the sky just cleared, Xian Chen, who was sleeping, slowly opened his eyes, and then walked to the basin to wash himself briefly. After leaving the tavern, when he noticed the fearful eyes downstairs, Xian Chen raised a sneer at the corner of his mouth. "This young master, where is the master who was in the same room with you last night?" A tall and thin nurse was hesitant, but when he saw Xian Chen was about to go out, he mustered up the courage to step forward and ask. "Expert? What expert? Are you saying I'm very tall?" Xian Chen's words, whether intentional or unintentional, made these guys feel confused. However, one of the guard captains, who had the strength of a fighting master, said with a fierce face, "Humph, I was not here last night, so my subordinates were able to be bullied by you, but now I am here. I, Zhao Hu, put my words here. I know several adventure group leaders, big and small. But which adventure group does your master belong to?" Boom. However, just as the captain of the nursing home finished speaking, then Xian Chen, who was standing at the door, suddenly turned around. When the captain of the nursing home still had a fierce look on his face. Suddenly, a very fast palm, as if it had the power of thunder, hit him hard in the face. However, this was not the end yet. The captain of the nursing home was slapped hard on the face within an instant. Immediately afterwards, the man flew backwards like a cannonball. Bang! The captain of the nursing home hit the wall hard. Before he could react, he was beaten to death on the spot by the slap and he vomited blood. "How dare you kill someone?" Yogoan was so frightened that he could not speak incoherently, but he still roared loudly. "Ha, what? Do you want to be like him?" A hint of murderous intent flashed in Xian Chen's eyes. The nurse immediately gasped in fright and waved her hands. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 63. Faced with Xian Chen's threat, those nursing homes dared not even say a word. On weekdays, they may be able to show off their power due to the terrain. But if you really encounter something as hard as Xian Chen, you can only break your teeth and swallow it in your stomach. Opposite this tavern is the pharmacy of Wanyazai. Although there were already many soldiers on the other side going to buy the medicines needed to enter the mountain. But after they witnessed this scene, they all seemed to turn a blind eye, which was staggering. Just as these nursing homes were begging for mercy, there was a loud noise of people. Immediately afterwards, a young girl walked out of the 10,000 medicine room. The girl is still wearing a white dress today. It's just that this dress is significantly shorter than the one yesterday. The breeze whistled by, and the girl's dress danced slightly in the wind. Some of the soldiers who admired the little medical fairy looked at the scene and seemed to want to stare out their eyes. There's been a lot of fighting and killing this early in the morning. It seems that Mr. Suankin's temper is really strong. The little medical fairy opened her lips slightly, and her beautiful eyes looked at Xian Chen with a hint of pleasure. Xian Chen turned around when he heard the sound and saw that it was the little medical fairy. He raised the corner of his mouth slightly and said sarcastically, "This Warcraft mountain range is complicated enough, but it is really so high that the mountains are far away. Any cat or dog can become the overlord here. Who are you mocking, kid? It's just that, considering your age, your tone is quite young. It's best not to let our grizzly bear adventure group encounter you in the Warcraft mountains, otherwise, you will definitely have to walk around without food." These soldiers, who were originally looking like nymphomaniacs, turned ugly and said evil things to each other after hearing Xian Chen's insinuating taunt. Okay, he is a talented boy who has become famous in Wuyutan City recently. If you don't even know him, then you are really ignorant. The little medical fairy covered her mouth and smiled softly, as if she wanted to deliberately expose Xian Chen's identity. Those supporting soldiers who were originally furious, all looked puzzled when they heard the little medical fairy's intentional or unintentional reminder. They looked at each other, as if they wanted to see the answer in each other's eyes. "Miss Yen'er, it's almost time for Wan Yaozai to go into the mountains to collect herbs. Don't keep the young leader of the Wolfhead Adventure Group waiting." A middle-aged man wearing Wan Yaozai's exclusive clothes stepped out of Wan Yaozai. When he noticed that the little medical fairy was chatting very happily with a strange boy, he hurriedly reminded him. The little medical fairy turned back and glanced at the middle-aged man who looked anxious. She frowned slightly. She hesitated for a moment and then smiled and said, "Guard Lu, why don't you do this? Isn't it that the minimum requirement for recruiting soldiers into the mountain is at least 2-star dojet? I see that Mr. Xian Chen has a good appearance. He came to the Warcraft Mountains for training when he left the family for the first time. Why don't we just let him follow our Wan Yaozai and his entourage into the mountains?" The soldiers were all shocked. They are all beginning to wonder where this young man came from. How could he be so admired by the little medical fairy who is called the Ice Beauty? But the middle-aged man reacted immediately. The person who can attract the attention of the little medical fairy is definitely the kind of young master from an aristocratic family with a good background. If that's the case, do all of you here have the support to meet the strength of a 2-star fighter? If so, you can come to me to sign up. In this case, we can go into the mountains to collect herbs together. As the middle-aged manager of Wan Yaozai yelled, the soldiers all looked at each other in confusion. But when some of the soldiers reacted, they rushed to the middle-aged manager of Wan Yaozai to sign up. Seeing so many people signing up, Xian Chen looked at the girl in front of him with a smile. He said calmly, "Miss Yen'er, I remember that I have never met you. Why do you feel like you really know me when you see me?" Hearing this, the little medical fairy turned around and faced Xian Chen with a sweet smile on his face. "Why, Mr. Xian Chen, is it possible that Wuyuan City also stipulates that other people are not allowed to enter without authorization? Don't forget, I have participated in all the auctions held in Wuyuan City in recent days." When the little medical fairy said this, her pretty face turned red. Xian Chen didn't realize it until now. The influence of miter auction is indeed good near Wuyuan City. Not to mention the foundation building spiritual liquid not long ago. That was all kinds of embellished sea blows that had gone through Middle's auction. Therefore, as the doctor of Wan Yaozai in Qingshan town, it is natural for the little medical fairy to be able to go to miter auction. But what surprised Xian Chen was that in that vast sea of people, there were so many people paying attention to him. The little medical fairy saw that Xian Chen was a little distracted, so he stretched out his white left hand and waved it in front of Xian Chen. "Wow, a roar!" Then Xian Chen held the other person's jade hand tightly. I have to say that as a doctor, the little medical fairy really knows how to take care of himself. Not to mention the smooth skin, even the skin color is not comparable to that of ordinary women. Xian, Mr. She has never been held by a boy before when she has grown up. Now that such a situation occurs, the little medical fairy who does not shy away from it is naturally shocked. Some of the soldiers who noticed this side saw that the young man dared to hold the little medical fairy's jade hand. They all gnashed their teeth angrily, and some of the more ill-tempered soldiers even pulled out their weapons, as if they would attack Xian Chen in the next second. Ignoring the looks of those people, Xian Chen silently let go of his hand. When he saw the little medical fairy walking towards the steward of Wan Yaozai, knowing that he was bored, he returned to the tavern hall and took out a jar of good wine from the cupboard. Then he opened the seal and started drinking alone. "Miss Yen'er, there are exactly 50 people registered this time, including the young master. With so many people here, I think no matter how ferocious the monsters in the Magic Beast Mountain range are, let alone seeing them, even if we encounter powerful monsters, we still have a chance to fight, right, the steward said cheerfully. The eyes looking at Xianchen were also full of ambiguity. Of course, Xianchen would not pay attention to such a clown, so he took out a bag containing 100 gold coins from the ring and threw it on the table before walking out again. As Wang Yaozai recruited troops, a huge troop of troops soon headed towards the entrance of Qingshan town. At this moment, there are also soldiers at the gate of Qingshan town loudly announcing that the adventure group is recruiting people, and they are willing to give a good sum of money. Seeing that the prices given by the large and small adventure groups are all different, many of the soldiers who originally joined Wang Yaozai to collect herbs in the mountains chose to leave temporarily. After all, these soldiers mainly go into the mountains to earn money for supporting soldiers. Only with a good income can you enjoy a different life. Although Wang Yaozai has beauties like the little medical fairy, in the face of the real reality, rather than going into the mountains to collect herbs with a beauty, it is better to earn more money so that you can live happily. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 64. In the Silent Forest. With the publicity of Wang Yaozai's stewardship and the influence of the little medical fairy in the local area, in an instant, a combined team of about 50 people was attracted. During this period, the steward of Wang Yaozai was even paid 500 gold coins, attracting many casual people. Not long after, this mighty team marched slowly in the forest. Now that those supporting soldiers are employed by Wang Yaozai, they are working extremely hard. Xianchen frowned and noticed. Although those supporting troops only have the strength of 2 starfighters, but their eyes were all on guard. Due to the special nature of the Warcraft mountain range, the species of Warcraft is even more elusive. So when they take over the dark places among the trees, they will sweep them very carefully. And the palms of each of them were tightly holding the weapons at their waists. It seems that an emergency will happen in the next second, and it is best to deal with it in time. Some senior soldiers seemed a little relaxed. Often for people like them who have been hanging out in the Warcraft mountains all year round, even if their eyes are crossed, you will definitely be able to identify some signals representing danger and safety from the other person's eyes. Call. Hear a gasp. Suinkan's eyes fell on the little medical fairy beside him. At this moment, she was gently wiping the sweat on her forehead with the back of her hand. Look at her breathing slightly. Coupled with those soft cheeks, she looks so affectionate. As for some young soldiers who admired the little medical fairy, they also wanted to come over and ask if they needed help. But when they noticed a handsome young man walking from the escort with a smile on his face, they all chose to remain silent in a tacit understanding. Xianchen, who frowned slightly when he saw that the person coming was quite handsome, was confused. The young man had already taken out a clean handkerchief from the ring in his hand and handed it to the little medical fairy. Miss Yenner, the air in the Warcraft mountains is dry and mixed with a lot of stench. You are so rich, so you have to take good care of yourself. If Miss Yenner needs it, I can have the troops in the regiment build a sedan to carry you to your destination. The smile that appeared on the young man's face, although it belonged to the same kind of admiration, in Suinkan's opinion, it must be demonic. The little medical fairy looked at the handkerchief embroidered with mandarin ducks and was slightly startled. But when he reacted, he smiled and refused. No, Muley, thank you for your kindness, but I don't need it. The smile of the little medical fairy was one of incomparable innocence. Under this extremely pure smile, not to mention the young man known as Muley, even Xianchen looked on in a daze. It's so beautiful. Xianchen was surprised and lost his voice. The young man opposite was in the same daze. But after hearing Xianchen's sudden words, a trace of hostility flashed across his face. With an unhappy face, he tilted his head and looked at Xianchen, and said with an unhappy expression, "Who are you, kid? How can you walk together with Miss Yenner?" This young man had an unhappy look on his face. Instead of making Xianchen feel angry, he only felt a little funny. Xianchen smiled disdainfully, then raised his hand and put it on the little medical fairy's shoulder, this sudden intimate gesture. Not to mention how ugly Muley's face was, even the soldiers who admired the little medical fairy were ready to make a move at this moment. I said I was her cousin, do you believe it? Xian Chen said with a sneer, but no matter how he sounded, it sounded like he was mocking the other person. Some of the surrounding soldiers watched the scene happen, but they all commented one after another, saying that Xian Chen was brave enough. Oh my God, is this little brother impatient? He doesn't even know that his father is the leader of the Wolfhead mercenary group. I don't know, but this kid dares to openly provoke Muley. I respect him as a man. Haha, who doesn't know that Muley is the leader of the Wolfhead mercenary group with his father, so he is like a local prince in this Warcraft mountain range. Now that this happens, this kid will definitely be like those who didn't open their eyes at the beginning. They were bullied inhumanely like the soldiers who supported them. Muley. Wolfhead Army Corps. Xian Chen was stunned for a moment, but when he recalled it, he remembered the scene when he first came to Dochi continent. I remember that I had just traveled through time. If it weren't for the shelter of the airborne system. Perhaps he has become the ghost of those few who call themselves the Wolf-Headed Adventure Group's soldiers. Haha, how are you, kid? Are you scared now? Muley felt lost when he saw Xian Chen actually heard the conversation around him. I thought that the other party was afraid of his background, so he pretended to be arrogant. I'm sorry, I'm afraid, or not, I don't feel that way yet. I just heard they said you were from the Wolfhead Adventure Group. Xian Chen narrowed his eyes slightly. His eyes immediately glanced at Muley. Then he noticed that about 20 people had a badge hanging on their chests. And this badge is indeed carved with a one-eyed wolf head. You call this a wolf head? Xian Chen pointed at the one-eyed wolf head on Muley's chest, raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and said disdainfully, it's clearly a dog's head. Ha ha ha. Almost instantly, the people who were already in a tense atmosphere burst out laughing at Xian Chen's teasing. Others who had wolf head badges hanging on their chests had livid faces and wanted to kill them on the spot, seeing this incompetent boy in their eyes. Muley's originally somewhat proud smile suddenly froze on his face. I'm afraid he never thought that someone would dare to use the badge of their Wolfhead Adventure Group as a joke. Muley swallowed his saliva angrily, and with his whole body trembling, he warned Xian Chen fiercely, boy, I don't want to kill anyone in front of Miss Yenur, so I count you lucky today. However, as the young leader of the Wolfhead Adventure Group, I, Muley, still want to warn you that if you survive today, you will not survive tomorrow. Gritting his teeth, Muley turned around angrily. And those soldiers who still wanted to watch the show also exclaimed with disappointment. Hearing the discussion of those supporting the soldiers, Muley Jo shouted loudly, people with wolf heads, please pay attention to me. We are about to enter the Warcraft Mountains now. Don't capsize the boat in the ditch because of someone. Yes, young commander. Hear Muley's roar. There were dozens of big men with the badges of the Wolfhead Adventure Group around. Immediately, they responded in unison, and the neat tone caused those stragglers who were still teasing to shut up. And even the little medical fairy, who was hugged by Xian Chen, couldn't help but glance at Muley's back. Master Xian Chen, sometimes I'm really curious, what kind of person are you? The little medical fairy's expression of laughter and tears made Xian Chen slightly confused. But at this moment of doubt, the little medical fairy sped up and moved forward. Xian Chen, who was distracted, noticed that the right hand that was originally resting on the young Dr. Xiang Xiang's shoulder had slipped to his leg. He raised his right hand that had just touched the little medical fairy and looked at the hair in his palm. Xian Chen was stunned for a moment, and a proud smile gradually appeared on his face. He quickly rushed towards the little medical fairy. The surrounding teenagers who were talking and laughing with the little medical fairy felt as if they were a pair of young lovers flirting. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 65. Young Captain, What should we do now? Are we just going to let that boy flirt with Miss Siener? What do you know? That boy already said he was Miss Siener's cousin, and Miss Siener didn't refute it, right? If that's really the case, if the young captain wants to catch Miss Siener, he must have a good relationship with this uncle. Uncle? Muley was stunned for a moment. Hearing the reminder from the soldier next to him, Muley felt complicated in his heart. Although Muley does have an urge to kill Xian Chen with his hands. But after calming down, I really realized that the little medical fairy who used to be as cold as an iceberg seemed to be really happy in front of that young man. Evil. Although he had seen the smile of the little medical fairy before, compared to what he saw today, it was a world of difference. Muley took a deep breath and looked back at the two people who were still flirting, but felt a little blocked in his heart. After an unknown amount of time, when the group of people were outside the Warcraft Mountains, everything was calm. However, not long after the team entered the Warcraft Mountains, a small-scale Warcraft attack suddenly broke out. No. It's the red ice snake. How the hell could I meet you here? Everyone, cheer up. This red ice snake is quite common in this Warcraft mountain range. Its properties are just like its name. It has ice properties. Listen to me, this red ice snake ice contains cold poison. If bitten by it, if the poisoned person is not treated within half a day, the blood in the body will be frozen by the cold poison until death. What? Some of the soldiers who were joining the adventure group for the first time turned pale with fright when they heard these reminders. And those more experienced soldiers immediately grasped their weapons and began to resist these red ice snakes that would attack at any time. Xian Chen frowned slightly and looked up at the red ice snakes hanging on the tree trunks. Then he turned to the little medical fairy beside him and said softly, "Are you afraid of these red ice snakes?" "I'm not afraid," the little medical fairy replied with a smile. Xian Chen felt a little surprised. Although there were many soldiers to protect him, the red ice snake was still a beast in the final analysis. The little medical fairy was able to remain so calm despite being attacked by animals. It must be said that she was indeed a strange woman who wanted to go to the mountains all year round. Ah! Just when the soldiers were preparing to resist the red ice snake. Suddenly, there was an exclamation from a direction, and some soldiers ran over immediately. However, in just a moment, many soldiers were already bitten by the red ice snake. After being bitten by the red ice snake, the faces of the few soldiers who were eroded by the cold poison instantly turned as pale as ice sculptures. And when Xian Chen noticed that the bitten soldiers were unsteady and fell to the ground, Xian Chen was ready to take action. With a wave of his right hand, a silver sharp sword was held tightly in Xian Chen's hand. I saw Xian Chen, as if stepping on the stars, raising the silver sword in his hand, and facing one of the red ices that was about to attack. Suddenly at this moment, a girl's exclamation suddenly pulled Xian Chen's eyes back. I saw only a fat leopard with a tail like a snake. Rushing through the crowd. The little medical fairy was protected by many people, but the snake-tailed leopard was too fast, so the soldiers almost had no time to react. Snort. Xian Chen snorted coldly and threw the silver sword in his hand instantly. When the snake-tailed leopard flew into the air and was about to knock down the little medical fairy. Immediately afterwards, the sharp sword penetrated the back of the snake-tailed leopard's head in an instant. Puff. Blood was scattered all over the ground, and the soldiers who were not very optimistic about Xian Chen now all looked at him with admiration. After the attack by the red ice snake and the snake-tailed leopard, the troops who gathered after being attacked by a monster became more cautious. As the team continued to advance, perhaps because they entered the territory of the Warcraft, a large number of Warcraft seemed to have a tacit cooperation with human wisdom, launching attacks against these humans again and again. Seeing Xian Chen killing enemies with a silver sword, even Muley, who had looked down on Xian Chen before, looked at him with eyes full of admiration. After all, in this fighting spirit continent, martial arts can be respected, so even Muley, who is the young leader of the Wolfhead Adventure Group, has to admire him at this moment. This young man has such abilities at such a young age. It seems that his achievements in the future will be limitless. Haha, with this young man joining us, we feel a lot more relaxed. It seems that all the money we gained this time was in vain. I heard that he is Miss Sienner's cousin? Remember, doesn't Miss Sienner have no relatives? Is she related to you? Can she tell you in detail? Besides, the way Miss Sienner looked at the young man seemed to have little stars shining. I think there is no lie in this matter. Relatives? Muley frowned slightly, took a deep breath, held the heavy knife in his hand, and slashed hard at the attacking monster. Listening to the discussions of those around him, Xian Chen just smiled faintly. For him, killing monsters was for himself, if not for others. The little medical fairy watched the scene the whole time, staying quietly by Suankin's side, feeling the joy of being protected. As the team continued to move forward, after an unknown amount of time, they finally arrived at the so-called herb collection area. Everyone, please take a rest. Now that we have arrived at the herb collection area, it is our turn for Wanyazai to take action. The little medical fairy turned around and smiled at the injured soldiers. When those soldiers saw this girl in a white short skirt, everyone felt that it was worth it no matter how tired they were. But Muley watched the surroundings very vigilantly, and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, although we have arrived at the herb collection area now, we cannot take it lightly." Muley's reminder made those originally relaxed soldiers become alert again. The supporting troops of about a dozen people dispersed independently and guarded one side. But those who work in Wanyeozai are the ones who can truly relax and collect herbs. Looking at the busy Wanyeozai pedestrians, Xian Chen realized that he was bored, so he walked towards a small dense forest. After passing through the small dense forest, what appeared in front of us was a rather steep cliff. Standing on the edge of the cliff, looking down the cliff. But it is full of lush green forests, which is quite beautiful. My eyes scanned the edge of the cliff. When his eyes fell on one of the locations, his eyes suddenly paused. Frowning, Suankin's eyes finally stopped at a plant with pale white flowers on the edge of the cliff. Looking at this plant, there are pale white flowers blooming. After careful observation, I unexpectedly discovered that there was a red fruit among the blooming flowers. He casually tapped out a burst of energy, and then the crimson fruit was cut open, and a faint medicinal fragrance emanated from it. Xian Chen then squatted down slightly, stretched out his palm, and prepared to take it off. Please vote for favorites. All kinds of requests. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 66. When you are about to touch the plant. Suddenly, a jade-like white hand stretched out from the bottom of the cliff. Xian Chen was slightly stunned when he looked at this scene. In this lost moment, that white little hand grasped Xian Chen's outstretched hand as if intentionally. During the contact between palms, the man below him quickly retracted as if he was electrocuted. Xian Chen was puzzled and looked around. When what came into view was a soft face with an ethereal aura, a slightly surprised smile appeared on Xian Chen's face. And the girl looked at Xian Chen with a little panic. But when he saw who the other party was, he said awkwardly, "That, Mr. Xian Chen, can you give me a hand? I feel that if this continues, I may fall." The little medical fairy's words really made Xian Chen laugh. A seemingly weak girl was able to climb such a cliff. I have to say that I want to become a real doctor. Not only must you have super medical skills, but you must also have super abilities. Xian Chen did not answer the other party's words, but stretched out his hand to hold the other party's white hand, and then followed Suankin's palm with force. The little medical fairy who was climbing on the cliff jumped up from below under Xian Chen's exertion. Her pretty body drew a wonderful arc in mid-air, and then she jumped up to the top of the mountain nimbly. "Thank you." When his footsteps touched the ground, the little medical fairy whispered a word of thanks, and then quickly withdrew his right hand that was tightly held by Xian Chen. An inadvertent blush flashed across her pretty face, and she pointed at the plant in Xian Chen's hand, and her expression instantly changed to one of surprise. "When did you get it? If you rely solely on Doshi's cultivation, it might not be so fast, right?" The little Dr. Xian Dai frowned slightly and rolled her black eyes, as if she wanted to see something from Xian Chen. However, Xian Chen shook his head and smiled, then lifted the plant in his hand, looked at the blooming pale flowers, and handed it to the little medical fairy. He smiled lightly and said, "I don't know why I took it off, probably because you need it." The little Dr. Xian Dai frowned slightly, but she was so shocked by Xian Chen's sudden words that she shuddered. She didn't expect that the young man in front of her was actually as good at flirting as rumored. This is called balanguo. This herb is extremely rare among mid-level medicinal materials. If you take this ripe white orchid fruit to a drugstore and sell it, it should be worth more than 4,000 gold coins. Since Mr. Xian Chen said this is what I need, can he keep his word? The little Dr. Fairy bit her red lips and spoke softly. I have to say that although her appearance is not extremely beautiful, but that soft and unique temperament is quite exciting. If it were him before, maybe Xian Chen would have some weird ideas. But now that he has experienced the changes in the Xiao family, Xian Chen no longer has that thought. I, Xian Chen, have always said I am unique. Besides, these white apples have no effect on me. Since you are a doctor, this white orchid fruit should be of great use to you in saving people. So instead of just leaving it here to rot, it's better to be a favor. Hee hee. The little medical fairy smiled and carefully put away the pennyroyal fruit. So I walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. Noticing the changes in the little medical fairy, Xian Chen walked to her side. Follow your gaze downwards and look between the cliffs. The cliffs are steep and covered with gravel and strange trees growing randomly. Just as Xian Chen was puzzled, he saw from a gap in the trees that there was an extremely dark hole on the cliff. Looking at the cliff with the help of the slanting sunlight, Xian Chen turned his head and looked at the little medical fairy who was quietly in a daze. You are under the cliff in front of you. You are not just for this white orangutan fruit, right? Xian Chen asked casually with a smile, but it made the dazed little medical fairy wake up instantly. At Xian Chen's sudden inquiry, a flash of panic flashed in the little medical fairy's beautiful eyes. Xian Chen took in the other person's expression and took a deep breath. Then he continued, if you can trust me, I may be able to help you get the things in the cave. It's just that I have something to say first. If there is really any treasure inside, you must let me choose first. The little medical fairy, who was originally a little happy by Xian Chen's words, was instantly so angry that Xian Chen's words made her choke up. However, it has long been a fact known to everyone in Wuyuan City that Xian Chen is a fighting master. If the little medical fairy really wants to do something, then the first thing she must consider is the consequences. In this desperate situation, the little medical fairy could only nod silently. Looking at the raised corners of Xian Chen's mouth, the little medical fairy's rosy mouth opened slightly and said softly, that cave should be occupied by a certain expert. Even so, I have never been in. So, I don't know much about what treasures are in the cave. But when I went down, I heard many frightening beast roars coming from inside. Under the roar of those beasts, I didn't dare to stay any longer, so I hurriedly climbed up. It's just that when I noticed this white orchid fruit, I thought about picking it, but then I met you. Well, I just looked at it. The cliff is really steep. If you rely solely on yourself, you won't be able to get in. Xian Chen frowned and nodded, but he didn't want to. His words aroused great interest in the little medical fairy. So, with Master Suanken's help, we will definitely be able to get in, right? the little medical fairy stood with his hands behind his back, tilting his head slightly, blinking his big eyes that seemed to be talking. Looking at the cute little medical fairy, Xianchen smiled, and after hesitating for a moment, he said jokingly, "Huh? What you said is wrong. I, Xianchen, am just a young man with only the cultivation of a doshi. Who knows if there is any danger down there? Besides, didn't you say before that there were a lot of beast roars coming from the cave? What if I walked in and came out with a skeleton? Wouldn't it be a big loss?" Xianchen's sudden words made the little Dr. Xianlei feel burnt on the outside and tender on the inside. She probably never thought that Xianchen, who was notorious to outsiders, would be so shrewd. Seeing that Xianchen actually wanted to leave, the little medical fairy snorted coldly, then turned to Xianchen's back, who had just walked a few steps, and said, "If Mr. Xianchen is willing to help me get the treasure in the cave, I, the little medical fairy, am willing to use my own character to guarantee that I will promise you anything." "Anything?" Xianchen stopped. There was a hint of danger in the curve of his mouth. After turning around, he stepped in front of the little medical fairy. He looked the little medical fairy up and down with a hint of teasing on his lips. Xianchen suddenly lowered his head, and then, his lips touched the delicate earlobe of the little medical fairy, and said softly with a bit of teasing, "If it is that kind of thing, would you be willing to do it?" The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 67. You are so bad. The pretty face of the little medical fairy turned red, like a red apple. Xianchen smiled, then stretched out his hand to hold the left hand of the little medical fairy, and said softly, without further delay, "Why don't we go in now?" "Well." Hearing this, the little medical fairy hurriedly stretched out his other hand to hold the other person. He said with an anxious look, "You can't be like this, Mr. Xianchen. If we go down at this time, Muley will definitely become suspicious." The little medical fairy shook her head and said in a deep voice. Seeing the little medical fairy being so cautious was something Xianchen never expected. "If that's the case, then I'll listen to you." Xianchen reached out and touched the other person's head, then let go and prepared to leave. Looking at Xianchen's back, the little Dr. Fairy bit her red lips and continued, "Our herb collection team will stay in the Warcraft Mountains for one night. If possible, I hope we can come back at night." "At night? Aren't you afraid that in this dark and windy month, I might do something outrageous to you?" Xianchen smiled contemptuously and continued to leave. "I believe you won't." Hearing the words coming from behind, Xianchen was slightly startled, muttering "idiot," then raised his hand and waved, gesturing for the other party to follow. Seeing Xianchen, he didn't say anything. The little medical fairy exhaled a breath of hot air, calmed down, and then followed Xianchen's back and walked out of the dense forest. When Xianchen and the two walked back to the team one after another, the soldiers who were responsible for guarding the herb collection team were already looking forward to it. But when those people noticed the graceful silhouette, they gradually walked out of the dense forest. Muley, who could no longer hold himself back, immediately ran towards the two of them. However, when he noticed that the pretty face of the little medical fairy was extremely red, Muley's originally happy expression suddenly froze in embarrassment. "You." Muley had some anger on his face, but when he noticed that there was a hint of murderous intent in Xianchen's eyes, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Thinking of Xianchen's figure in front of him killing the monsters, and the warnings from the crowd of soldiers. Even the stupidest person would not dare to provoke the other party at will at this moment. "My cousin and I, cough. My cousin and I went for a walk in the dense forest, and we found this white orchid plant," the little medical fairy said, and took out the white orchid fruit. Looking at this white orchid fruit, Muley's nervous heart finally felt relieved. After all, Muley, as the young leader, is naturally familiar with this kind of white fruit. "Monsieur, although this white orchid fruit is precious, it is often found on the edge of a cliff. My cousin can help you this time, but next time, you must ask me for help. Well. Muley sighed deeply, then his eyes fell on Xianchen again. Seeing that Xianchen's eyes no longer had the killing intent, he felt truly relieved. Although Muley thought so, some of the soldiers started to speak openly. Tisk, tisk, Miss Yenner is a beauty on our side. How dare your cousin go to the dense forest to pick some medicinal herbs? Haha, to put it nicely, it's a dense forest, but to put it worse, it's a small forest. Tisk tisk, this lush green forest is really suitable for the occasion. If you dare to talk nonsense again, believe it or not, I will let my men smash your mouths. Before Xianchen could speak, Muley was already furious. It is well known that he likes the little medical fairy. Although he was very reluctant to think about it, because the little medical fairy was right in front of him, even if it really happened, he could only silently choose not to happen. Now I hear those people around me saying their words intentionally or unintentionally. No matter how much Muley is willing to deceive himself, he has no choice but to explode at this moment. What's more, Muley and the little medical fairy are only friends at the moment, so it's hard for him to ask in detail. He can only vent his anger on those stragglers who speak freely. It has to be said that Muley's influence really silenced those soldiers who spoke freely. And those who supported the army with wolf heads were also pulling out their weapons at this moment, completely waiting for Muley's order. Clenching his fingers, Muley stared at those guys with cold eyes. Haha, with your temperament, you are beguiled by just a few words. You want to chase my cousin? You are still far away. When Xianchen walked past Muley, he did not forget to sneer coldly. Muley, who was still a little annoyed, felt a little confused after hearing Xianchen's words. But when he noticed that Xianchen was sitting alone under the tree enjoying the cool air. When the little medical fairy went to the herb collection team, there was a hint of relief in his cold eyes. With the return of the little medical fairy, the team set off again after a break. Although this time, there were 2 more monster attacks on the road. But this time everyone's counterattack was much stronger than the previous times. But Xianchen still waved the silver sword in his hand, and every time he killed, he could get many cheers from the surroundings. When the sky gradually darkened, the team actually arrived at the medicinal gathering place designated by Wan Yaozai. Xianchen looked at the basin where medicinal herbs were growing everywhere, and took a deep breath. The fragrant medicinal fragrance immediately made people feel relaxed and happy. Thank you very much for the support along the way. Let's camp here tonight. But please be careful not to damage the herbs around you. Thank you all. The little medical fairy wiped the sweat from his forehead, turned around and gathered troops around him, giving a gentle warning. After hearing the words of the little medical fairy, the soldiers immediately responded loudly, and then began to set up the camp in a very orderly manner. Xianchen noticed that the little medical fairy was able to get so many soldiers to start working with just one sentence. I instantly felt that the little medical fairy's status in the hearts of these soldiers was definitely very high. Then I'll make arrangements for the herb collection team, the little medical fairy said playfully. Suanji gently recommended Xianchen, then walked to the area where the herb collection team was responsible and started to raise his hand to give instructions. Watching this scene happen, Xianchen felt dumbfounded. I secretly thought to myself, little fairy, so I quietly found a quieter place under a tree, and began to enjoy the temporary comfort brought by the setting sun and dusk. Not long after, when Xianchen opened his eyes, he unexpectedly discovered that white tents had been set up in the originally empty basin. Looking at these white tents standing on the ground, he looked at the little medical fairy who was still directing the herb collection team, and hesitated for a moment. Xianchen still got up and prepared to head towards the location of the little medical fairy. But just as Xianchen stood up, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Xianchen turned around, and when he saw Muley, he had a look of confusion on his face. However, Just when Xian Chen was not about to pay attention to the other party, another voice from the other party suddenly came out. Cousin, are you interested in hunting? The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 68. Xian Chen looked towards the source of the sound in confusion. When he noticed that it was Mu Li, a disdainful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. What? As the young captain, do you still need to hunt in person? Xian Chen's taunt made Mu Li feel embarrassed. But because Xian Chen is the cousin of the little medical fairy. According to what those soldiers said, that was his future uncle, so naturally, Mu Li just scratched his head in embarrassment and walked towards Xian Chen. Hey, you can't say that, cousin, our Wolfhead Adventure Group is, after all, the main force of the team this time. They've done all the things like setting up camp. As for dinner, of course it's up to us to take care of it, right? Mu Li laughed happily, but Xian Chen listened carefully and found out that it was really what happened. After nodding, he picked up the silver sword on the ground and motioned for Mu Li to lead the way. This time, Mu Li took a total of 5 people out. These 5 people are all very strong men. It can be seen that Mu Li is preparing to capture some big guys. Walking into the dense forest, the soldiers of the Wolfhead Adventure Group seemed to be very vigilant. Perhaps because Xian Chen was by his side, Mu Li felt much more relaxed along the way. He noticed that Xian Chen beside him didn't say any gossip along the way. Mu Li, who felt that the atmosphere was a bit depressing, showed a chrysanthemum-like smile and asked, I wonder what kind of cultivation my cousin is. Maybe you can tell me something. Xian Chen rolled his eyes at the other party with a speechless expression, immediately pulled out the silver sword, and then threw it towards a more private place. Following an extremely miserable howl, Xian Chen said without looking back, I'm not older than you, but you calling me cousin always gives me goosebumps. Xian Chen left a cold sentence and walked towards the direction of the sword. When those people reacted, they followed him one after another. When everyone discovered that the sword held by Xian Chen actually killed a relatively strong wild boar, Mu Li, who was standing aside, hurriedly applauded. Brothers are indeed brothers. They can kill a wild boar with just one sword. Hee, but you guys should be more careful. Don't let your brothers take action all the time. You know what? Mu Li first praised Xian Chen, but also glared fiercely at the soldiers he had brought out. When Mu Li looked at these soldiers, he seemed to be cursing them all as a bunch of waste. A soldier carried the 300 to 400 kilogram wild boar on his shoulders and headed back to where the herb collection team was. Firstly, it was to inform them that they were safe and sound, and secondly, it was also to show the courage of their Wolfhead Adventure Group. Ignoring Mu Li's words, the group continued to delve deeper. When he reached a cave entrance, Xian Chen suddenly stopped. The people around him also stopped and looked towards the entrance of the cave. If it had been daytime, maybe these people wouldn't have done anything. But now it was getting dark after all, so coupled with the black hole that made it impossible to see anything, they naturally felt a little chilled down their spines. Roar! Suddenly, at this moment, an extremely deafening roar came from the cave. Xian Chen raised his eyebrows, jumped hurriedly, and jumped to a relatively tall tree trunk. Before those people could react, an extremely wide fleshy palm struck a soldier on the abdomen hard. Puff! Boom! There was a loud noise, and then the soldier who was photographed died on the spot. Light a fire, Mu Li shouted, and the remaining soldiers lit torches one after another. As the dim firelight appeared, a tall black shadow suddenly ducked to the side. Mu Li held the torch and swept it to the side. When he saw clearly what kind of monster the other party was, he felt his whole body numb like an electric shock. Only a ferocious giant beast with a strong body, tall height, and human appearance suddenly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The giant beast's eyes glowed green, and there were 4 sharp fangs on the top and bottom of its mouth. What the hell is this? Xian Chen stood on the tree trunk and looked at the scene happening below, feeling a little confused. Xian Chen may not know what kind of magical beast this is. But everyone in the Wolf Head Adventure group is not clear about it. Muley's voice trembled and he shouted loudly, "This is Haywen. Run!" Muley shouted immediately, but the monster known as the ape suddenly raised its fleshy palm and slapped Muley hard on the chest. Puff! Being hit by this sudden fleshy palm, Muley immediately flew upside down like a cannonball. Xian Chen watched the scene happen and shook his head helplessly. "Young Captain. Brothers, try your best. That boy Xian Chen must have done it on purpose. That's right. He must have led us here on purpose." "Shut up. Ahem. Don't say that to him." Muley resisted the urge to vomit blood and angrily scolded the soldiers. Xian Chen frowned slightly. He did not expect that Muley would be able to speak to him even when he was running away. Just when Xian Chen hesitated for a moment, the remaining soldiers were all seriously injured. However, as the monster gradually approached the dying Muley, Muley said feebly, "Brother, if you are watching, I hope you can take action. If you are willing to take action and save my life, Miss Yenner, I will give it to you." Hee hee. In this quiet and eerie dense forest, a man's laughter suddenly came out. As Muley looked surprised. Immediately afterwards, a huge white sword light that was enough to illuminate the area instantly fell from a tree at high speed. Bang! With a muffled sound. Muley only felt that this area was shaking. When he noticed that the magical beast that was about to approach suddenly stopped. Suddenly, several drops of blood were sprinkled on his body. The stench made Muley feel sick. And the faces of those supporting the soldiers also showed joy. When a young man holding a sword landed from high altitude, the soldiers who had originally mocked Xian Chen for his temporary escape felt ashamed. Xian Chen looked back at Muley, who was still breathing, and said lightly, "Don't thank me. If it weren't for your last words, maybe you would all have become corpses." Everyone who originally felt warm in their hearts felt cold after hearing Xian Chen's words. But Muley, who was halfway through the gate of hell, forced a sad smile and said, "Brother, you are better than me. I, Muley, think I am in the wrong. I will not argue with you." "Haha, you do, but are you worthy?" Xian Chen sneered, then looked in the distance. Following the noisy shouting, a team of about dozens of people quickly rushed towards the place where the fighting broke out. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 69. When Xian Chen noticed a graceful figure from behind, he was walking hastily towards the side. The original sarcasm on Xian Chen's face gradually became gentle. "Xian Chen, are you okay?" The little medical fairy spoke worriedly, but when she saw that Xian Chen was not injured, she felt relieved. Cough, cough. Muley, who was supported by the soldiers, had no choice but to leave in embarrassment when he saw that the little medical fairy cared so much about Xian Chen and not about himself. "What can happen to me, but Muley is seriously injured? If my guess is correct, all his internal organs may have been completely torn apart." Hiss. The little medical fairy took a breath, although Muley's strength was only slightly stronger than the ordinary soldiers. But the magical beast that can shatter his internal organs is definitely not an ordinary person. However, when the little fairy doctor's eyes fell on the corpse of the monster that was split into two parts, he couldn't help but be stunned. After careful observation, the little medical fairy hurriedly turned away. A faint blush appeared on her face, which was enough to show that she knew a thing or two about the killed monster. Xian Chen, on the other hand, stared blankly at the graceful figure in front of him. After a faint smile, he stepped forward and said softly, "What's wrong, Miss Yenner? Do you know that monster? Uh, I know you, but, but, but. How could I possibly know such a disgusting monster? The little Dr. Fairy said something incoherently, then glared at Xianchen pretending to be angry, and rushed towards the place where the medicine collection team was. Not long after, those burning bonfires slowly appeared in Xianchen's eyes. But unexpectedly, they discovered that those campfires were like ferocious beasts with teeth and claws. Since Muley was seriously injured, the soldiers of the Wolfhead Adventure Group were more vigilant than before. However, some of the soldiers who temporarily joined the team looked nervous. Xianchen walked under a tree and was about to close his eyes to rest when he suddenly heard the gentle laughter from the little medical fairy. "Gee, cousin, what's going on? Have you forgotten the agreement you made with Xian'er?" The little medical fairy walked up to Xianchen playfully and looked up at him, illuminated by the bonfires. I have to say, it really makes the beauty of the little medical fairy even more mysterious. Looking at Xianchen, who was looking at him, he was a little obsessed. The little medical fairy then covered her mouth and smiled softly, looked herself up and down, and then cast her gaze towards the dense forest not far away, as if to hint at something. Xianchen understood, and raised an inexplicable and weird smile at the corner of his mouth, then suddenly stood up, took the other person's hand, and teased, "You and I are alone, are we really not afraid that I will be the beast in the forest and eat you?" Hee hee. The little medical fairy smiled lightly, blinked her big beautiful eyes, and then said something incredible. "If Mr. Xianchen is really that beast in the forest, then even if he is eaten by you, what's the harm?" Ahem. While the little medical fairy and Xianchen were talking, suddenly several soldiers with ugly faces came over. Xianchen noticed that these soldiers all wore wolf head badges on their chests. He frowned slightly and immediately protected the little medical fairy behind him. The little medical fairy put her arms around Xianchen's waist, stuck out her head, and looked at these wolf-headed soldiers who were equally confused. "Mr. Xianchen, Miss Xian'er, my family always invites you." These few soldiers, all full of energy and sharp eyes, are like eagles soaring in the sky. "Elder? How can your small adventure group still have elders?" Xianchen sneered. The wolf soldier, who was aware of the mockery, remained unmoved. Seeing that these guys obviously didn't intend to leave, their palms turned into fists. When they were about to raise their hands, they were suddenly pulled by the medical fairy behind them. "Haha, cousin. Since we, Wanyaozai, have invited the Wolfhead Adventure Group to support us all the way. And he, Muley, was seriously injured for the safety of our herb collection team. Why don't we just go and take a look?" Xianchen was speechless, but he still accompanied the little medical fairy and walked towards a larger tent. There were 2 warriors with 5-star strength standing outside the tent guarding the tent. It was obvious that the Wolfhead Adventure Group was extremely concerned about Muley's injury. After walking into the tent, when he noticed a white-haired old man treating a young man with a lifeless face, Xianchen casually sat on a chair. Although the little medical fairy had been exposed to soldiers all year round, when he encountered such an old man who exuded murderous aura, he only felt a little dizzy. "Humph," Xianchen snorted coldly, but the aura emanating from the old man's body disappeared in an instant. But the guy who was called an elder by the Wolfhead Adventure Group instantly felt an unprecedented killing intent. Swallowing the dry spit, he turned around and looked at the 2 of them. When he looked at the slim little medical fairy, there was a hint of unintentional danger in the corner of his mouth. But when his eyes stopped on Xianchen sitting on the chair, he was so shocked that he stood up from the chair in a hurry. "Xiao family Xianchen. Why are you here?" The old man's words shocked the soldiers who came with him. Almost at the same time, his eyes fell on Xianchen. Seeing that this young boy turned out to be the famous Xianchen in Wuyuan City, he only felt that this world was really too small. When the little medical fairy saw that the old man was so afraid of Xianchen, he quickly walked to Xianchen and stood next to him. The girl is slim and graceful, with bright eyes and white teeth. Her eyes are moving, which contains charm and an inexplicable charm that is difficult to detect. As the pair of autumn eyes flickered, the little medical fairy spoke softly to the old man. I wonder why this elder invited me and my cousin to come to this tent. Cousin? The elder had a strange look on his face. He had originally thought that he could take the little medical fairy as his own. After all, the popularity of the little medical fairy in the Warcraft Mountains is still acceptable. However, what the old man never expected was that he would actually meet Xianchen in this tent. Xianchen of the Xiao family, a 17-year-old fighting master, biological father, Xiao Buobutong. The elder murmured to himself, looking at Xianchen with a somewhat dull look. After Xianchen heard these words, his expression became a little ugly. Taking a deep breath, he stood up slowly, under the confused gaze of the old man. Suddenly he raised his hand and slapped the old man hard on the face. Snap! It was like thunderous applause. But it made the old man's dull expression instantly become extremely ugly. The old man with an extremely livid face gritted his teeth and said, Xianchen, this is the Warcraft mountain range, not your Xiao family. Are you really not afraid that I will kill you here? The old man almost roared. And those personal followers also drew out their personal weapons and faced Xianchen with swords and guns. Looking at these weapons that seemed to glow with cold light, Xianchen smiled faintly and immediately hugged the dull little medical fairy next to him. With the wary expressions on their faces, the soldiers suddenly raised their feet and kicked hard at the elder who was ready to kill Xianchen at any moment. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 70. Bang! Xianchen raised his feet and landed. The old man, who was unable to defend himself, was shot backwards in an instant. Ahem! The old man was coughing crazily. The force of his feet almost made him feel dead, but it made him dare not look at Xianchen with the same contemptuous look he had before. As for the surrounding soldiers holding weapons, how could they have thought of such a sudden situation? Seeing that the elder with the strength of a great fighting master was even unable to defeat Xianchen. And these scumbags, who only had the cultivation level of a fighter, felt a little shocked for a moment. At this moment, a soldier with a broken arm walked out of the tent. However, when he saw that the enshrined elder was kicked away, he was about to curse. When he saw who the kicker was, he hurriedly shouted a warning. Stop it! You are confused. Young Master Xianchen is a terrifying being who can even kill an ape with one sword. How can you, the salty fish and rotten bastards, just mess with him? What? If Suankan's reputation in Wuyutan City was not enough to convince these soldiers who were licking blood from the knife edge. So the fact that one sword can kill Haywen will definitely make these guys who have been licking blood from the knife edge all year round kneel down and bow their heads. What kind of status does Haywen have in the Warcraft Mountains? For these supporting soldiers, it is naturally very clear. As for the old man who was kicked over by Xianchen, after hearing the warning from the soldier with a broken arm, he deeply felt that being kicked by the other party was already the most polite thing. I didn't expect that young Master Xianchen would be able to kill He Yuan at such a young age. I admire you. It's just that the Haywen is really strong after all. Young Master Xianchen can kill him with only the strength of a fighting master. I just feel that young master is not just a fighting master. This elder became a lot more honest after being kicked by Xianchen. Now after hearing that Yongbing said that Xianchen had the strength to kill He Yuan, the smile on his face was as bright as a chrysanthemum. Haha, what kind of strength do I have? If you feel that you have a long life, you can continue to try. It's just that I'm in a good mood now. If my cousin wasn't standing beside me, I would be afraid that the bloody scene would affect her physical and mental health. I'm afraid just by looking at a few salted fish and stinky shrimps like you, they are already the dead souls of my Xianchen sword. The faces of these supporting soldiers were extremely pale, but because they were afraid of Xian Chen's strength, they could only dare to be angry but dare not speak out. The little medical fairy glanced at him sideways. Although she had heard beforehand that Xian Chen's strength was that of a fighting master. But now he can kick away a strong man with the strength of a great fighter with just one kick. Coupled with the body of the ape that was split into two by the sword energy, the careful little medical fairy instantly felt that Xian Chen, who was clearly so close, felt so strange. Ahem. The little medical fairy blinked, then raised his head, with a calm smile on his face, and said, "I didn't expect my cousin to be so good. I really want to go to Wuyuan City with my cousin to play when I have the chance." Hearing this, Xian Chen withdrew his gaze without any trace, and then said softly to the smiling little medical fairy, "If you want to go to Wuyuan City, I will naturally take you there, but not now." The elder watched the scene silently, listening to their cousin and cousin talk, and felt goosebumps all over his body. And Muley, who was lying on the bed, was already awake. It was only because he witnessed Xian Chen being able to kick him over with one kick that the elder, who had the strength of a great fighting master, continued to choose to fall into coma. Not long after, Xian Chen felt a little stuffy inside the tent, so he released his hold on the little medical fairy's waist and walked out of the tent. After the little medical fairy hesitated for a moment, he was about to chase Xian Chen. The dying Muley suddenly made a sound. "Miss Yen'er, Muley's life was saved by Master Xian Chen. Although Muley has a poor character, he still knows how much he weighs in the face of big issues. So Muley is here to bless you first." Muley said so many words in one breath, but the old man with an extremely solemn face suddenly sat down and motioned to him to say less. Ignoring Muley's words, the little fairy doctor walked away. Outside the tent, Xian Chen noticed that there were so many eyes looking at him, so he whispered to the little medical fairy who walked out of the tent, "You said that if you hadn't met me and been with so many people, jackals, tigers, and leopards, you wouldn't be here today. What's going on at the party?" Although Xian Chen intended to ridicule, after experiencing what happened just now, the little medical fairy felt that Xian Chen really felt a bit safe when he was by his side. Although the young man around him made frivolous remarks, in the final analysis, his character was definitely much stronger than everyone present. The little medical fairy frowned slightly, and then prepared to walk towards the tent specially built by Wan Yazai. But under the breeze, the little medical fairy who was already wearing a short skirt felt a slight chill. Coupled with Xian Chen's intentional teasing just now, the little medical fairy who was originally in a good mood couldn't help but shiver under the cool breeze. "That. If you don't mind, I'd like to invite you to stay in my tent." Puff. Some of the soldiers who gathered near the people who were drinking and eating meat couldn't help but burst out in anger after overhearing the little medical fairy's words. One of the soldiers looked at the lush green forest, threw away the barbecue in his hand, and said with a slightly sour taste, "Oh, it's dark and windy this month, I'm afraid it's going to rain." As for the sigh of supporting the soldiers, Xian Chen and the little medical fairy naturally heard it. After Xian Chen hesitated for a moment, he thought of the agreement he had made with the little medical fairy on the cliff, so he smiled and nodded, and at the invitation of the little medical fairy, he stepped into the temporary tent. After those soldiers witnessed this kind of thing, some young soldiers who liked the little medical fairy covered their chests, feeling as if their hearts were being stabbed severely by some sharp weapon. In the tent, the little medical fairy sat quietly on the edge of the bed. She lowered her head shyly, but did not dare to raise her head to look directly into Xian Chen's burning eyes. "You. Don't get me wrong, I invited you into my tent solely because of the previous agreement." The little medical fairy explained weakly, but she didn't want to know that when she raised her head to look at Xian Chen, she noticed that Xian Chen had casually spread a piece of cloth on the ground and chose to rest. "You, hum." The little medical fairy snorted angrily, then blew out the candle lit beside her, and then lay down on the couch. But just when the little Dr. Xiangang felt like falling asleep, but I felt like my whole body was suddenly shaken. You, The little medical fairy woke up on the spot, but when she was about to shout out, Xian Chen suddenly covered her with his hand. Don't talk, do you really want to be misunderstood by those people? If there is the light of a candle at this time, then Xian Chen will definitely be able to find the beautiful big eyes of the little medical fairy, shining with tears.